All right, let's dive right in. Today we're looking at Harriet Lane's novel, Other People's Fun. And wow, this book just peels back that glossy filter of social media to show you the dark, psychological warfare that's kind of simmering just beneath the surface of our digital friendships. It's a gripping and honestly a pretty unsettling look at modern life. This quote from the book, it really sets the entire stage, doesn't it? It's this stark reminder of the unspoken deal we all make online. For every performance, you've got to have an audience. And that whole dynamic, that push and pull of seeing and being seen, is right at the heart of this novel's conflict. So let's get into the setup of the story, what the novel calls a filtered friendship. This is really that gray area where a real, genuine connection starts to get dangerously blurred with a curated performance. Just to give you a little context, Other People's Fun was published in 2023. It's a really sharp psychological thriller, but it also has that literary fiction feel. So, if you're a fan of the complex social observations you'd find in a Sally Rooney book, or maybe the suspense of Gillian Flynn, you're absolutely going to eat this up. Okay, so the premise seems simple enough on the surface. We're following a woman named Ruth, who's feeling a bit isolated and reconnects online with an old, super glamorous friend, Suki. But what starts out as just a harmless scroll through someone's picture-perfect life, well, it quickly spirals into this dark, voyeuristic obsession. And just like that, their digital friendship becomes a psychological battlefield. Now, let's get into how all of this builds into the book's main idea, something it calls the performance trap. And believe me, this is where things start to get really juicy. So what exactly is the performance trap? Well, it's this idea that so many of our modern friendships are really built on a foundation of curated lies. It's a state where that constant hunt for validation and, that little bit of envy we all feel scrolling starts to disguise itself as real intimacy and connection. So how does this trap actually work? It's a cycle, and it just feeds itself. It all starts with a performance, that perfectly crafted post. Then comes consumption. We scroll, we see it, we absorb it. This leads to validation, the likes, the comments, and yeah, a bit of envy. And what does all that validation fuel? Well, it fuels the need for even more performance. And so the cycle goes on and on and on. All right, let's break this whole cycle down with 5 key truths from the book, each one revealed through a really powerful quote. Think of this as our deep dive into the mechanics of digital deception. This first quote just captures the whole illusion perfectly. Social media lets us literally manufacture happiness. It takes real, messy life and cleans it up into these neat, filtered squares of content. It creates the world where loneliness is something you hide, not something you share. It's all performance over reality. And here's where it gets really tricky. The novel argues that these kinds of friendships create what it calls a hall of mirrors effect. Instead of genuinely connecting, the characters are just using each other's online personas as a ruler to measure their own self-worth. It leads to this profound identity crisis. It really makes you ask, who are you, really, if your value is just a reflection of someone else's curated life? Keeping up that perfect facade is exhausting. The book really shines a light on the huge amount of emotional labor it takes to maintain the performance. And eventually, that curated perfection just isn't sustainable. The cracks start to show, and the fragile, often very lonely truth underneath starts to get exposed. And this brings us to such a painful paradox. Here we are, more connected than we have ever been in human history. Yet the book argues that this hyperconnectivity often just puts a mask on a deep, deep sense of isolation. All the fun we see on the screen can actually create a massive emotional and social disconnect in our actual lives. So what's the way out? How do you break free from all this? The book's final insight is that real authenticity isn't passive. It takes courage. It demands that you stop just being an audience member in someone else's life, and that you actually start living your own, completely unfiltered. And that's the perfect lead-in to the book's actionable takeaway. It doesn't just point out the problem. It actually offers a prescription for how we can all start living unfiltered. The book proposes something it calls the Unfiltered Challenge. It's got 3 parts. First up, a 24-hour reality audit. You basically ask yourself, where in my life am I performing versus just being authentic? Second, you use the mirror test before you post anything. Ask yourself, am I looking for a real connection or am I just looking for validation? And finally, create daily, unfiltered moments. These are activities that are just for you that nobody will ever see or like or comment on.
Okay, so with all of that in mind, let's get to our final verdict on Other People's Fun. How does it really stack up, both as social commentary and as a thriller?
The book's biggest strengths are, without a doubt, its masterful psychological observations and its incredibly timely social commentary. Harriet Lane is just so sharp. Now, on the flip side, some people have pointed out that a secondary subplot feels a little bit disconnected from the main story, and that can create some small tonal inconsistencies here and there. So, taking all of that into account, our final grade for Other People's Fun is a very, very solid 7.9 out of 10. And here's a quick look at how we got to that number. As you can see, it scores really high on content quality and practical applicability. I mean, the psychological depth and the actionable advice are just exceptional. Those minor narrative issues we mentioned just slightly ding the writing clarity and research quality scores, which brings us to that final grade. And all of this really leaves us with the book's central and, I think, pretty provocative question. In your own digital life, which one are you? Are you the performer up on the stage? Or are you part of the audience sitting in the shadows just watching? If this explainer got you thinking, I would highly recommend you check out Sally Roney's Normal People for its amazing exploration of complex relationships. And Susan Choi's My Education is another fantastic read that really dives into similar themes of consuming obsessions and what it means to live through other people. And that's our look at Other People's Fun. If you found this breakdown helpful, please be sure to follow, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating books and ideas. Thanks so much for joining me.